they need to also coach behaviors, the right behaviors for cold calling and stuff like that, which I know you're really strong on, same as me, same as Jerry. So hi everyone. This is episode 11 now of our Build with Stacky series. This week we have Ryan with us, a co-founder over at CallBlitz, but a long, illustrious career in sort of outbound sales, particularly from a cold calling background, and looking forward to diving into everything he's doing with CallBlitz and his views and his experience in the outbound sales world. Ryan, do you want to do a little bit of an introduction, let everyone know sort of your background and a bit of your history?
Sure. I'm excited for the conversation today. Thanks for having me. So again, Ryan Reisert, been in sales now for coming on 17 years. Started my career in 2008 as a back then lead generation specialist, as they called them, which is now the modern day SDR, before all these crazy tools. And worked my way up from lead gen to AE to sales leader fairly quickly in my first startup, and then had my first bout of entrepreneurship after about 3 years. I started a sales recruiting firm in San Francisco Bay Area in 2010-ish, as all the money was coming back into VCs after the last recession we went through. And, that's what kind of spawned my real excitement about sales as a career, just helping a lot of folks get their dream jobs and watch them accelerate into sales leadership, similar like what I was doing. I actually got recruited back to my first startup because I recruited my original sales leader, became the US managing director for an international startup because I had kind of worked my way up to sales leadership before I started my recruiting firm. I ran that for another year. So I had P&L responsibilities for about 3 offices in North America for a pay-per-click advertising tech company. And then I went on to become like the early stage founding sales leader for 3 different venture-backed startups, all in the performance marketing, ad tech, martech kind of space. All of those I grew and had some sort of exit. So they were all acquired. One was Inc. 5000. Another one was acquired by a unicorn, went public. So that was kind of the early stage of my career. 2000, I think it was 2015, 2016, I saw this report on LinkedIn that was talking about the rise of like what are the fastest growing careers. They published this report, and they said software engineers, data scientists. The third was sales development. And at the time, there were these coding academies. Folks might be familiar with the likes of like a dev boot camp back in the day. There was also another like data science school and even a product school in at least San Francisco. It was called Galvanize. And one of my buddies was running product school, which is another popular one now these days, as the COO. And I started talking to him about like, why isn't there one of these for sales? Like, look at this report. There's this demand for talent, but there doesn't seem to be this pipeline for sales development rep. Everyone wants an SDR with experience, but it's an entry level position. And so we started a boot camp, a 90-day boot camp for SDRs. It was one of the first ones. There's a ton of these now, but I ended up building that out, selling it to one that got funding in San Francisco. That company is now called Vendition. They're still around. After that, I wrote a book that's pretty popular for folks in tech sales anyway. It's called Outbound Sales No Fluff. Consistently ranked as one of the top 5 best books in telemarketing category on Amazon. It's been ranked by Book Authority as like one of the top 100 sales books of all time. It's a really short guide to getting started. When I wrote that book, it was really the basis of the curriculum we were teaching in the boot camp. It's just a very basic fundamentals. But the most important piece of that was my process that I use growing all the companies, which is something I call buckets. So I got a bunch of companies reaching out to me like, hey, how do we implement buckets into our tech stack, right? Like, how do I put outreach into, like, how do I do buckets with outreach? How do I do buckets in Salesforce? And so that spawned a new startup idea where I created essentially like a 90-day program for founders. Like, we were recruiting a bunch of reps to go into startups, teaching them the fundamentals, teaching them the tech stack. They were getting hired, and companies are just bastardizing the integration of their tools, throwing them to the wolves, hiring 10 to keep 2. It's kind of a mess. So wanted to try to solve that problem. Ended up raising some money for that company, and it turned into a essentially an outsourced SDR shop. Like we were setting up the tools, building the playbooks. The goal was to pass that over. The talent part was still a kind of a problem for these organizations, and they just wanted us to run it. And so we ended up scaling that up. And I had this idea because we were using Connect and Sell um, and Phone Burner actually as the dialers and running my process. And I discovered this idea with data that I tried to bring to Connect and Sell to actually build. They didn't. They wanted to do it. I was trying to transition this the business model to actually execute this and kind of be the channel seller of this concept. But again, I raised money and there was a little bit of concern of like our business model shifting that way. So I ended up selling my shares. That company ended up getting acquired. That company was called Sales Developers. This is right around the pandemic time, 2020. To Connect and Sell as a consultant to try to continue to build this concept, we were showing that we could reduce the amount of dials someone could use in Connect and Sell by about 80% and increase the yield by about 30%. So make 80% less dials, get 30% more meetings. Pretty good value proposition. But they sell dials, and that kind of got stuck at the. Chris Beal was really excited about it. John T. and Sean McLaren, not so much. They didn't want to cut their revenue stream. So I ended up leaving and starting a company that was called Phone Ready Leads. I built that out for 3-4 years or so, and I sold that about a year and a half ago to now, which is called TitanX. They were Apex Revenues, TitanX. So that's kind of my career journey. First 10 years building and scaling early stage startups from that zero to, probably the biggest revenue is around 35 million and some exits along the way. And then I've built and sold a couple startups myself at this stage in the sales development space.
And that's like such an interesting career. And like it's so, I guess, like outbound sales focused. Like the wealth of knowledge that you've got on hiring, like just some of the things you're saying about like people used to just, that hiring 10 to keep two. People used to, and probably to this day, still want to hire people with some experience, but they still view it as a entry level role. And so you must have seen like so many different trends, different opinions and stuff on how to build good SDR teams, right? And you yourself built several great SDR teams for companies. What do you see at the moment with the market? Like I imagine it's changed in a lot of ways, or do you think it's kind of just the same stuff, just being agitated, labeled when people are trying to hire SDRs? Do you think it's still that same? We want someone with experience, but it's still an entry level role. Have you seen a change?
In terms of the talent, obviously everyone still wants people with skills. I think the challenge that the market has today is that everyone's always looking for this shortcut, this magic bullet, this tool that's going to save them. And they forget that success starts with process first, right? And so if you don't have a process, the tools and the people are going to really suffer. So I don't know who deemed this. Someone had the saying of like, automation without like process is just like noise. You gotta have a process first before you automate. And so it's like for me, the equation is process first, then you can implement some of these modern tools and technologies, but it has to be the process driving the tools, not the tools driving the process. And once you've nailed that, then you put in the people. And
Yeah.
I think that what most people are looking at is like, how can we get the technology to do everything without this baseline understanding of what we're trying to accomplish? Like, what's the why behind this automation? And I used to always say process first, tech, then people, like I just said. What I'm finding though is that it really should be process, people, then technology. So if we slow, especially after the sales developers, where we were partnering with the Connect and Sells and the Zoom Infos and the outreaches, like we were one of the first ones to bring the parallel dialer sequencer integration to market. Like I consulted with Connect and Sell and Outreach on how to build their integration. They were the first one to do that. Dialbot, which is now Orem, did the same thing with them very early on how to kind of make these things work. And unfortunately, the leadership at these companies have, I call it the sales acceleration industrial complex, right? They're not trying to solve the problem in the right way. There's this, again, just like the military industrial complex, you've got the data vendors the sales engagement platforms and now the AI companies really trying to sell you a bunch of credits and a bunch of data, a bunch of seats, and they're not really thinking about how do we efficiently solve this problem. And it goes back to the process, right? So if you put the process in first, and then you put really good people, that understand the process, and now you then back in some of these. There's nothing wrong with some of these tools, but those tools have to be enabled the right way to get the outcomes you're seeking. Every single tool in the stack, you're part of this conversation, is they all promise X, 10X, do more with less. But like, you have to have people that will actually still do the work. You can't automate all this out. And then the biggest piece that I've seen happen, especially over the last decade, when I launched the boot camp and started, this was like the rise of the outreach sequencer. You started to see this rise of the silent sales floor and everyone trying to drive out of conversation. And everyone has forgotten that sales begins at that first meaningful conversation. And so we've lost this skill of being able to actually engage with people that we don't know. So having conversations with strangers is a lost art. People are afraid of it and they're still trying to automate that out. But the reality is, like, they're automating to the point where you still have to have that first conversation. And so I always think from first principles, how do I eliminate the waste and just try to get to that first conversation as quickly as possible? So to answer that question, what I'm finding in the market is just a talent gap that's always been there. But the talent gap now is, there are people that want to try to build these skills around the tools and the technology, again, without understanding the process and forgetting how to actually talk to people. And so it doesn't matter how good you are as a go-to-market engineer where you can create all these lists, etc. The last mile of all of this is, what are you going to do with that first conversation?
Yeah.
So, we're seeing that finding, especially younger reps, because again, people still see this as an entry-level role, finding younger reps that are actually willing to learn how to have conversations with strangers is a big problem. They do exist, and when you can find them, because of the process that I've built out over the last, let's say 17, and some of the systems and tools, primarily the solution I've created that is now TitanX, if you combine those two things together, you can theoretically no longer have to hire the 10 to find the two, hire the two, and they'll produce more than 10 in a very short period of time.
Absolutely. Like, so many things there that I want to latch onto, because like, you're speaking like exactly my language. And that's why, as you know, like, we kind of built Stacky. We want to simplify and help people just get the right tools in the right order. And often we're telling people, rip out like most of these tools. You don't need them. We want to get back to data that integrates into the CRM, into list views, so your team can be consistent. And then we drill and train and coach, enable them on like the actual ability to have conversations with people, add value, understand, create follow up, and that compound effect will create you more meetings in the future. And when people are doing it in the opposite direction because they think, oh, we can keep costs down, we can get AI, or we can get these tools to do everything for us, they're just burning time and they're burning cash, because that last mile needs, you're still going to have somebody who's capable and understands how to have those first conversations and start to generate, the top of funnel sales part of any funnel, right? So if we can get the people in, get them coached, get them understanding like that sales acumen, that sales development acumen, and those skill sets, get those first two hires, those first three hires, really like just completely full to the brim. And then once you've got all the right behaviors, then you can maybe get some tools to help give them a bit more capacity, or you can hire further down the line. And I think that's the key that I really think we are missing, or that industrial complex you've spoken about. It's like really created. Like, the silent sales floor is just not a really fun place to be. So who would want to be in there cold calling and having conversations if no one else is doing it around you? How do you feel about all these different tools then? Do you think a lot of the different tools, do you think there is a place for them further on? Or at what point maybe should a company consider, okay, we're at this stage now we can start to consider more tools?
I think it depends on the role. So I like to hyper specialize the functions in the the sales development role. And I think that for me, the way I think about it in the most basic kind of process is make a list, know exactly what to say against that list, figure out who on that list is actually somebody that if you call them, they'll pick up, and then, what's the rest? Call the people who actually answer the phone, follow up, and then let marketing do the rest, right? So if I think about how you specialize this, and this is what I do on the consulting side, outside of Call Blitz, I have a business where I work with organizations to show them how to set up the stack, and we actually recruit SDRs, bring them into them, and then pass this stuff off. We break the concept of like, hey, you need to go find someone who can do it all. No, you need to find someone who's really good on the phones, build this system that literally there's somebody else making a list for them. Leadership is honing the messaging framework for them. The list is segmented, scored to know these are only people that pick up the phone. Just call them. That's all the rep does. The SDR, that's all they do is just call and have the conversation. And then there's a team that does the rest, right? So there's a team that's building the list, kind of cleaning it up. If there's a referral, they go find it for them and put it right into the queue. They're just sitting there in the pocket all day long. And these reps have 40 to 60 conversations a day, right? So that's the role of that one specialist. Then there's a lead generation specialist, which is just list building, cleaning, getting it into a position where it needs to go. And then this rep that has the conversations, there's nothing wrong with compounding a first conversation to other channels. So you start to hone in some of those tools. So I caught you on the phone. Let me connect with you on LinkedIn. Let me send you an email. Maybe I like to use video in my follow-ups. So something like a Loom, it helps kind of, demonstrate certain things, go to their website, just tell the story a little bit better, really short stuff. But I'm not talking about cold Looms. I'm talking about we just spoke, making it a little bit more of like, let's get you into a video conversation, but that's post conversation, right? So I might be doing some of that. It's not cold. It's always from a actual connect. Now I can connect those tools. All the rest of the list that I can't get on the phone, which, if you take a list and you were to call it into infinity, you're probably only going to reach 20 to 40% of that list on the phone. So for the other 60 to 80%, you can push that into the other marketing channels. And I call them marketing because even phone is marketing, right? That first conversation is still marketing. Telemarketing, people like to call it, and get a bad name for it, but that's what it is. The other marketing channels, email, social, one-to-one, that can be specialized as well. Like you could have an internal rep that is a social specialist, an email specialist, but they're working that list if appropriate. If you actually look at the reach in those channels and the performance of these cold LinkedIn, cold email for most segments, unless you're selling to like sales and marketing folks, there's not a lot there. So more often than not, I would say just outsource that to some of these folks that call themselves go-to-market engineers, just to market to that list. But that's how I think about it. And so where do the tools come into play? I think you've already nailed them, right? You've got to have some sort of, and it's not just one tool, it's a suite of tools for data, right? So list building is a combination of a person plus the tool stack. And so there's data, then there's the CRM, of course, that's your core database. You've got to have that for orchestrating your lists and keeping things tight. You have a dialer, and not a parallel dialer, a one-to-one power dialer that is serving two functions. One, making it easy to connect to that list strategy for orchestrating your playbooks, not sequences, but playbooks around a stage and a follow-up date, not a step in a orchestration of 15 different channels, but a dialer that makes it really simple to put yourself into a really good workflow that keeps me super organized and allows me to be efficient, but not over dialing or parallel dialing. And then the second function of that dialer is call deliverability, which people don't talk about very often, but call deliverability is huge to ensure that the numbers that you're calling from aren't showing up as spam likely, scam likely, these types of things. So you want to have a dialer that has those capabilities. One, workflow, ease of use, keep me in the pocket, attached to my list strategy, and then two, call deliverability. Okay. And it's not making me click 15 things to orchestrate a dial, but I can still dial efficiently, right? And then the final piece would be, obviously, shameless plug, if you're a virtual sales team, some sort of virtual sales floor for those reps to be in a room together to learn and get coached and be together. I think that's an important piece to the stack for an outbound team. And then again, if you wanted to, you could start to think about something like a video solution for
Yeah.
follow-up.
And we're going to come into like more specifics on the tools that you're using and like the ones that you're finding effective at the moment when we get into like building with the stack. But you mentioned like a few things like ease of use, and like I think there are so many good tools in the market at the moment. And often I say to people, I don't particularly care a great deal which tools you're using. There are
Mm-hmm.
some that are slightly better than others. You know, like we've spoken, me and you, I know the guys that like Front Spin, Phone Burner, Phone, really good dialers. Also with the deliverability that a lot of other dialers maybe don't have. So they might be like top of the pile. But ultimately, it comes back to ease of use. Like, which one do your team? I've worked with teams where you give them one tool, they hate it, but the team I spoke to yesterday, they love it. And sometimes teams just have like a certain, they like the UX or they're more likely to use it. And user adoption for a tool is also a big factor, which I think a lot of teams or a lot of leaders overlook. And you know, if users are going to adopt the tools that you're recommending they use, then you're going to have a much greater chance of having them then follow the right behaviors and build the right behaviors that you want them to have. Otherwise, why have you put the tools in place in the first place?
Well, 100%. I mean, it goes back to process first. So if you don't have this process that people are following consistently, checklist manifesto, then the tools are just noise. You know, you can't just buy a tool to think it's going to solve the problem, and then even a small team of 3 to 5 reps, they're all using it in a different way. It just becomes noise. Like the tool should be serving the process to create workflow automations. It should be easy to use, should not require extra clicks. It should be enhancing their ability to get to the number one thing that matters most, which is daily conversations in our market. Like how do I have a system and a process that effortlessly gives my team the ability to get into as many conversations as possible with as least clicks as possible, right?
Exactly, and like your whole process is the way you've just given that description of all the tools, and I think like we'll start maybe looking and talking through that. It's about removing distractions for the reps. Remove those scenarios where they've got 4 or 5 different plugins on their screen. Removing the number of times they need to navigate to different screens and different applications. Have it all pull to one list. Have your top caller be able to work cleanly through that list. Have other people take care of loads of like the other pieces, rather than asking your SDRs to be everything to everyone and do everything under the sun. Is become in a lot of companies maybe like a bastardized role where the reps are just distracted and they don't know what they should be doing like hour to hour, what their KPIs and all that stuff is, and they're not able to measure what my dials to conversations to completions to follow-ups to meetings, like all that. Any rep should be able to look at that and know, cool, if that's my target, this is what I'm going to do for the next half an hour, that's what I'm going to do for the next half an hour. And that creates that compound effect in pipeline rather than the distractions of all these other tools.
Percent. I mean, you use the Chrome plugin example. I just find it fascinating when, I mean, let's just think about list building alone. Like you've hired somebody to go and produce pipeline, but 70, 80% of their time is sitting on LinkedIn with 15 different plugins to try to triangulate all this data and insights and then get that into the CRM and then into a sequencer. Um, and to what end, right? When you actually look at the probability of reaching that individual after all of these plugins, we're still talking about striking out more often than we get a hit on ball. And so the time, energy, and effort, not to mention, to your point, the distraction with just sitting in the freaking LinkedIn newsfeed alone.
100%. Yeah.
It's like no wonder the average rep's making 40 dials a day because they're sitting in a tool trying to build a list to find 50 people, and they get distracted every 5 minutes from a video that pops up on social.
Yeah. And I think the recently I've been doing like a lot of SDR leader or sales development leader like coaching and like one-to-one courses. And the thing we keep going back to is like, how can we remove distraction and help them focus? That's I think like more and more the main role of an SDR leader, and how I'm encouraging them to think about everything they do for their team. How are you removing distraction and helping them focus on the conversation? That's it. Outside of that, this tool, that tool, it's all just noise. That's trying to like create this industrial complex and just sell you more stuff.
Yeah, no doubt.
So let's dive in. I'm sure I could keep talking to you about this type of stuff for ages, but I want to actually if I bring up Stacky and we'll just walk through build with Stacky and actually understand the tools that you use to actually do and build like this more fluid, this more focused, this more consistent workflow. The scenario where people are able to have 40 conversations a day and the level of output that teams you work with and you build are actually capable of, because most people would kill to have a team that's able to do that, and they haven't worked out how to do that yet. And to your points earlier, hopefully this sort of the reason we've built and structured Stacky as we have falls into line with what you were saying. List building and data. And then all the other stuff comes after that. What engagement, what dialers. But this is where you start. So most of your work I know is on Salesforce. Is that what you guys are currently using?
Yeah, Salesforce is always the go-to recommendation for the tools that we set up. And then obviously from time to time, HubSpot comes into play too. So both of those are kind of the leading two vendors, but HubSpot's our core CRM.
Okay, you're using HubSpot.
Some customers use HubSpot. For me personally,
Salesforce.
Salesforce is the go-to. Yep.
Cool. Where are you sort of then doing that list build? What tools are you using at the moment?
Yeah, so again, this is done through a specialized team. So I'm not personally using these, but LinkedIn by far is the for the majority of clients. If your audience is on LinkedIn, you should use LinkedIn. And the funny thing is, you have Navigator in there. I actually find just like the core LinkedIn pretty useful, even before Navigator. But LinkedIn is the go-to. If you go and use any of these other tools for list building, what you'll find is even Clay or Apollo or the Rocket Reaches, etc., is you go in and use their firmographic segmentation, title search, etc. Even with his title as simple as CEO at companies, which you would think would be the easiest one to return. If I go in and I try to pull that list from a data vendor, and then I go back into LinkedIn after the fact, I will find more contacts on LinkedIn that are not getting pulled into those tools. And so you've got to use LinkedIn plus a data tool.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, we're doing a lot of work with Clay at the moment. Rocket Reach is one we've been testing. SalesBot's one we've been testing. I mean, Apollo, they're all being used, right? You got to kind of use them all. And if we're talking about research right now, not data enrichment, I would say that the two biggest ones are Clay and LinkedIn at the moment. And then do you have, well, no, that's for data capture. So for research, it's LinkedIn and Clay.
Yeah, nice.
As the two tools that our teams are using.
Really good point on like LinkedIn versus LinkedIn Sales Navigator. I haven't used Sales Navigator for at least a couple of years, maybe. I've used it on and off, but like I say, you can do pretty good with just LinkedIn, especially if you're maybe using like a Clay or Apollo's Rocket Reaches to maybe build some lists, and then using LinkedIn to just verify some of that, and then you can crack on. So SalesBot is also a tool you mentioned. Really like huge amounts of data in the US. Very good for data over there. One of the newer tools I think on the market, which I think people should definitely start looking at and considering as well.
Yeah, we're using that. We're using that on or testing that on a couple different campaigns right now. And then I know we're talking about my stack right now, but I know for one of my companies that I'm an advisor at, they're an agency. They're saying that it's really good. So
yeah, it's
newer tool.
For data in the US. ZoomInfo obviously have loads of data. Cognism have loads of data, but I tell people to go and maybe check out Upsell and SalesBot. I think they're both great data tools for US contacts. So that in mind.
So that was list building, I guess, research, which is humans, LinkedIn and Clay are good go-tos. Some of these other ones can help shortcut that path. So
yeah.
When it comes to then once we have the list, so we researched the list. So we target companies, and then we want to get the companies first versus the titles to find the companies, make sure the companies are qualified. Then we move into the people at those companies with what most people do is they'll start with like a title search, but we have a very advanced filtering process that we run through with the humans. So let's just go back to that CEO example. If I go and do a CEO search, I want to pull down without enrichment yet out of these tools if we're using any tools. I just want the name, the title, LinkedIn URL. And then what I do is we have this filtering process on these titles. So CEO, if I put that into a tool, I'm going to get CEO, Chief Executive Officer, but I'm also going to get executive assistant to the CEO. I'm going to get, if they're bigger companies, sometimes I'll get a CEO on a list at a company, but if you clicked into their profile, they're actually the CEO of some multi-level marketing thing and they're an intern at a company, right? So you've got to be able to not just take the title for what it is, but filter it further and actually check the LinkedIn profile and the job that they're doing and weed stuff out. Even an exact match on a title is not the exact person that I'm looking for. So I just want to make that super clear. Once we have that list built, we have that LinkedIn URL attached to that individual for the ones that you can find on LinkedIn. Then we move into the data vendors for the purposes of data enrichment. And so data enrichment then allows us to go and, again, I'm running phone first. So I want to get as many phone numbers as I possibly can get for those contacts. And then, of course, the email is kind of table stakes these days, but you're going to get the email and then you have the LinkedIn URL. Yeah. So from there, we're using it all. We're going to waterfall all of these folks. We've probably, let's see, the Zoom info is still king, as like a main source. Mm-hmm. Again, you've got Lead Magic, which is not on here right now. Lead Magic is, from a mobile data perspective these days, probably the most. And by the way, I'll introduce you to Jesse if you haven't talked to him yet. Yeah. Lead Magic, from a testing perspective, like very low cost mobile data with high quality. So you don't get as much coverage, but if they return a number, it's almost at and sometimes better than Zoom Info's mobile data in a lot of cases, and it's getting better. So I'm using Lead Magic, Zoom Info. Of course, we'll backfill with Apollos and the Rocket Reaches and the sales bots of the world. So we're just trying to go and fill in the gaps and get as many numbers as possible. And then from there, we what's the next step in the process for you on the stack?
Here we've got this way, maybe into intent, but I'm not.
Yeah. So intent for me would be Titan-X, which is first party intent on who picks up the phone. So we take that list and the intent becomes who can we actually reach. I haven't really seen intent play through. I think there's a lot of potential there in some situations, but it's hard. Like if you have a product or service that lots of people are searching and active, like engaging for, it's like I don't know. If you're a data company, right, it's probably easy to find people looking for data companies as an example. But there is just so many different niche products and services where it's hard to identify intent. Like call blitz, how do I find intent for people looking for a virtual sales floor? It's, exactly. I can go make some assumptions on other things. I would fall back more on triggers. Like we use job boards and job listings as a way to create intent. So like looking at the job descriptions and the job to be done. So, if I'm looking for companies that are, have a team that make cold calls, well, I can go and look to see if they have active job postings for remote reps. In the job description, it says they're responsible for making cold calls. So that's kind of intent, but it's more of like a trigger. I haven't seen a lot of this other like, hey, here's a list of people that are actively looking for what you do, just because.
I 100% agree. Like, I think intent's kind of been missold a lot over the last few years, like last 5-6 years in particular, where it's been sold to sales teams as like a tool that their SDR should really focus on. I think it needs to be kept with marketing. Marketing can use it to help scoring their leads.
Yes.
And all that type of stuff. And then goes part into their lead scoring process for when's an MQL that could be handed over to the SDR team. I think for the SDR team, this section, the intent is largely a distraction, and
Yeah, this is
kind of
the
like
let marketing do the rest.
yeah, like it misleads the SDR team, and again goes back to process and like the behaviors and the habits, makes them think, oh, this company's really hot because it's turned up on like intent, rather than actually, if you have enough, you get enough calls in, you build your own pipeline, have that compound effect of follow-ups over time. You don't need this. Like the
I
compound
think
effect of
that I
lots of
think that
calling.
the one value with, and you have it as first party intent. The one thing that I think is interesting in this space, and we're seeing it now with Callblitz because we have the pixels on our site to see marketing logs, and we're starting to ramp up calling right now. Just did a session yesterday, and 70% of the connects that we had made it to our website, and it actually identified them. It's like, oh yeah, we just spoke with them today. Oh, now they're on our site, and that's a strong level of intent, specifically around the framework that we teach, which is like we're not trying to shove meetings down people's throats. We're trying to activate our market, and so that first party intent on did my call actually drive traffic? That's very interesting, and I think that that's an underutilized system. So I would recommend using like an R2 RB2 type of technology. So there's a bunch of these in here. You have in here where you can identify via reverse IP traffic that's not necessarily coming in and requesting information or downloading content, but your outbound efforts are actually driving inbound interest. And
Yeah,
when you
exactly.
think about sales and marketing alignment, I think there's value there. Also, do believe that on the marketing side, being able to go and leverage some of that third party intent for making some shots on goal to be more segmented. It's not a bad thing, but it's definitely not a tool I'd recommend for the sales development team.
Yeah, great point there. Really like that. And then and one thing I think is worth calling out here is just like the number of sort of data tools or data enrichment tools that you're sort of using here. Like it's because, and I guess it's because what we're going to come on to, the way you guys are using sort of dialers and the
Correct.
volume of dials you are making. Most teams making 50 or 100 dials a day, they probably don't need all of these data tools, and what they need to do is focus on coaching their teams, building their teams' capabilities so that they have more and more conversations. They create that compound effect. They have like a really good list built, and they're going to just really focus and hammer the phones. And that's why you're accessing more data solutions than maybe
Well,
others.
and keep in mind, our reps are not accessing these tools. There's a
There's a
lead generation
gen
specialist who's
tool.
using all these
Yeah,
tools to ensure. I mean, think of it like a big spreadsheet. Every data vendor has good data, okay data, and a lot of them have mostly shit data. And so you have to be able to uh, fill in, if it's a big spreadsheet, fill in all the columns of what's the missing data, and you'll find that coverage is not complete. There's not an apples to apples comparison. So that's why we're using multiple data vendors so that we get complete coverage. I'm taking the time up front to say, these are accounts that we absolutely want to be breaking into. These are the people within those accounts that we want to try to get conversations with. So I'm not going to rely on one data vendor to give me that one shot. I want to be able to shoot my shot across multiple. Now, some of them have the same data, but what you'll find is that there's actually a lot of gaps being filled when you waterfall it. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't recommend the reps doing that. Here's the thing that's super important to your point. If you're not using something like a Titan X to then take all those numbers and weed through all the garbage, your reps will waste a tremendous amount of time waterfalling data. This is why dial to connect as a reported stat is so low right now. It's not that
Mm-hmm.
less people are picking up the phone, it's that reps have more access to more numbers to attempt. So if I have on average 1.5 to 2-ish, 2.2, it's actually right in the middle, about 1.7 numbers per record. It makes sense that my dial to connect has gone down almost in half, right? Because I'm dialing two numbers now versus one. Back in the day, it was hard to find just one number to call somebody. Like when I started my career, you didn't have data vendors like this. You would go to a website, find the 800 number, call in and say who's in charge of, get the number. Maybe there's a dial tree. You get a name, then there's a dial tree, you get a number, and now you put that in your CRM. It's one number.
Yeah.
Now you
Number.
can have, you could have 7, 8, 10 numbers for one person. If you have your reps doing that work, it's a tremendous waste of time. But we use that in our stack because it's still the funnel above the funnel. The lead gen
Yeah.
team's cleaning it up. Then we
Yeah.
use Titan X, and that gets honed down to just one number to call. Reps only call one number. It's the best number when we get to this section here, which is, so we have data, it's enriched, it's scored through Titan X, and then we get into calling. And on the phone, my go-to is Frontspin that connects into Salesforce.
Yeah. Great.
And the reason is what we talked about earlier. It's a very clean, easy workflow inside the dialer itself. It's attached to reports that are driven out of Salesforce. And then it has this really strong call deliverability mechanism built into it. It's an add-on. You have to use their number package, but they will monitor the numbers for spam flags, automatically try to get them cleaned up, and ensure that your call deliverability is top notch.
Absolutely.
So that's the dialer that we're using.
Like to your point earlier as well, like that deliverability or connectivity for like phones, people aren't really aware of yet. I'm sure it's something that's going to become more and more of a hot topic over the following year as people start to realize it's the thing. People are familiar, for people listening who are not really sure what we're meaning. In the same way as there's email automation, which then created and drove whole email deliverability complex and industry, it's similar. Just it's similar for phones. It's kind of like the easiest way for people to just understand at the moment. What's happening on the back end for any dialer you use, there's a load of gates that calls have to go through before they're even connected, and they can be flagged as spam at one of, I think, phone burner. They told me there's about 9 different gates that a dial has to go through, and at any one of those, it could be flagged as spam and stuff, right? So when you buy dialers and when you explore your dialers, ask them how do they manage numbers, how do they make sure you're going to have good deliverability, good connectivity, and stuff like that. And Frontspin are one of like the leaders.
Yeah, and a little note on that. So for people to understand how this works, I mean, think of it like email deliverability. You can only send so many emails per day, per hour, otherwise you get flags. It's also a function of people automatically marking you as spam, your open rates, your response rates, these types of things. Same thing for the phone. Every carrier that you're targeting has their own algorithm, and it's a function of how many times you're dialing. So your caller ID that you're using, how many times does that actually get displayed? Hourly and daily, the actual connect rate, the talk time, and then manual flags. Those are kind of the basic concepts there. And so, rule of thumb, like if you're dialing more than 10 from the same CID, caller ID, more than 10 times in an hour, which is not that much, you could get a flag. More than 80 in a day, you could get a flag. If your connect rate is less than 10%, you can get a flag. If your talk time is less than like an average talk time of, I think it's like a minute and a half or something like that, you can get a flag. Those are all basic things that you're going to get a flag for anyway. And that's why you have to use multiple numbers. You've got to rotate them and then have this built in. One thing you haven't done, and if you talk to the phone burner team, you should think about getting in here, is phone burner has actually decoupled their number monitoring solution. So if you're using another dialer, they have a product now called Armor.
Armor.
Yep. And Armor is a way to attach number monitoring, cleaning, and scanning into any other dialer. You can actually give them their numbers to monitor for you, and they'll help you ensure that you're mitigating some of these things, even if you're not in phone burner as a dialer.
Yeah, amazing. So then let's go back up to enablement. This is where CallBlitz comes in.
Yeah.
This is a key part of your platform, your stack at the moment. Like I've been mentioning it to people. I don't think people are even aware that it was possible to have a virtual sales floor that is bring your own dialer. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, so CallBlitz is, yeah, exactly what you said. It's a virtual sales floor. So for reps that are remote, dispersed, not in the office all day, It's a place for them to go and think of it. I like to explain it as your virtual sales office. Don't just use it for when you guys want to sit down and do a power hour. Get your team in call blitz all day long. It's a looks like a Google Hangout. You can connect your dialer to it, and now reps can actually start to call, and there's no interruptions when they get connections. Other reps, you can listen in on those calls. If you're a trainer or a coach or a leader, you can go in there and coach them live, chat with them, give them prompts to make them more successful. And then we've got a suite of other solutions coming in soon that will enhance that use case. But for right now, it's a virtual sales office that your reps can show up to, call together, learn from each other. It's great for onboarding, ramping your teams, and then for leadership, giving visibility. One of the things that my companies that I work with that use Callblitz love is they've got their virtual team in there, even a small team of just 2 or 3. They're in there all day long. And anytime the leader has time, they can just pop in, just like you were in the office. Like, hey, how are things going today, guys? Listen to a couple calls, give them an update, do a quick little, hey, quick thing we want to do, enable them with a new campaign, and then they're off to the races. There's no need to go and try to organize a meeting for everybody. They're in there already. It's not off Slack. They just join, do a quick update, and they're off to the races. The teams that I've seen that are using this the right day on an all-day basis have doubled or tripled their team's activities just by having this in place, knowing that the leader can pop in anytime and see what they're doing. And then we can monitor all their activities. Obviously, your CRM will do that, but the system's kind of giving you a roll up of what happened during the day. It's a great little solution for remote dispersed teams to improve onboarding, ramping, training, but also just enhance the overall performance of your team as a way to motivate, encourage, and have fun while dialing.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's such a good idea. We've at my old company, we had 100, 130, 140 SDRs globally in different offices, some remote, some in offices. But we trialed, the parallel dialers that come with virtual sales floor, and everybody loved the virtual sales floor. Everybody like, can we buy this? Can we buy this? We want the virtual sales floor. It's all the team cared about. They wanted the virtual sales floor, and we're not going to switch the dialer. So unfortunately not. But it's now people have that option, right? And it's so good. One piece I don't think you mentioned is also that you can also access other coaches through that, right? So we
Yeah,
have coaches who might do power hours. They might post, "Oh, I'm going to be calling at these times," and people can have access to that as well.
yeah, we just launched a community behind Call Blitz. So anyone who subscribes to Call Blitz, even if you're a solo rep that wants to come on with Call Blitz, you can get access to other people's public blitzes, go call with other teams, and we have a community of coaches. I coach in there once a week. We do kind of an AMA, ask me anything, maybe a lesson, and then we do live cold call coaching, and we have a suite of other coaches that are in there offering up open office hours, or you can go and listen to them making calls. It's just a great place to go and find other people that are committed to getting better on the phone. We run
Definitely.
weekly competitions now, so you can come in and submit your best call. The group votes on it, and you can win real cash. So there's a lot of
Nice.
really cool stuff behind it on the community side.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's great. So I think is that kind of the suite then? That's all the tools, or are there more that we're cool have added? I know like there's a few data tools in here: Lead Magic, Titan X. I'm in the process of getting them on. We've had to stop some onboarding because I've just got such a backlog. They are top of the list to get on here, but it shows that. Sorry, before I keep talking, is this sort of the crux of it, or are there any other like areas that we're missing?
Now we got the list, we got the CRM, we got the dialer and the sales floor. Those are the core components. The only other thing that might be useful, which I use often, is I use Loom on the follow up stuff, but
Yeah,
that's post conversation.
yeah. Loom, great tool. I use that as well. It's to your point earlier. Like I think all of these like follow ups and these videos and stuff, like they're good to use after you've done the phone connections. After they're better used there than spending loads of time doing it before to someone who you've never met, may never ever watch the videos and stuff. Um, One thing I like that this has shown and demonstrated, even in 2025, when companies are looking at all these different tools, they're considering all these different tools, they're desperate to use all these AI tools and stuff like that. A team who are really good on the phone, who are really well drilled in the process and the people, they've got the right behaviors, they've got the sales acumen. All you've really done is added a few extra data options, restructured it in a really smart way. So you are maybe using, you're using a few tools, but it's structured in a way that benefits dialing and human conversation, and it focuses on that because that's what's going to compound and build you more pipeline. You're not thinking, I need to use the most intelligent AI, SDR, X pipeline magic, whatever they're going to call the next solution, right, out there. And that's what's, I think, distracting people these days.
No doubt. Yep. Make the list, know what to say, call the list, follow up. That's the key.
Ryan, absolute pleasure having you on. I'm sure people have learned like a ton from you, and we hopefully following some of your advice and connecting, looking into Call Blitz off the back of this. Everyone, please please subscribe, search Build with Stacky on YouTube, and follow up and stay in touch.
Thanks for having me today.
Cheers, Ryan. Thanks.
Cheers.